Eileen Griffin with the Heartland View from the Heartland Daily News, bringing you information and analysis about public policy stories that affect your life, your health, your freedom, and the nation's economy. This week, we're going to cover 3 stories out of the Heartland Daily News, and the 3 stories I'm going to connect with one word, and that word is incentive. So there's 3 different stories. They all have something in common, and that is the integration of this concept of incentivization. First, on the economy. So you saw a little shakeup in the market last week. There's a little volatility back up again today. So there is some weakness in the economy. We're starting to see some weakness. We also see that inflation is not transitional, at least at this point. It's greater than the Fed had projected, and inflationary pressures continue to build. So there's a little bit of concern there. Of course, we've been looking at this for quite some time with inflation, and we'll just see what continues to happen. The stock market, as always, we say it goes 2 directions. So while there's been this continued run up in the stock market, we also know that a large part of that is due to the Fed involvement. So the Fed continues to pump money into the economy, but that could stop. And just always remember, the market has 2 directions. One piece of good news out of the economy is the unemployment rate. And you'll see the correlation, and this is where the incentive comes in. The unemployment rate continues to drop and dropped significantly as soon as the federal unemployment benefits ran out. So people were incentivized to not work when they were getting paid more money to stay at home. They were getting paid this additional benefit through the federal government. Now they're being incentivized to go back to work. So unemployment benefits are running out. The additional money that was coming in weekly from the federal government is now stopped. You also saw the states that stopped that payment sooner had a better recovery in terms of employment and this labor shortage, as opposed to the states that continue to pay extra money. So you incentivize people, you get the behavior, you incentivize. That's incentives. Now, there's another incentive happening out there. On the economic front, there's also a story about what's happening with all of this massive spending. So we've talked about this a number of different times. It's even the mainstream media reports on the massive spending. You can't not know about that. So the Biden administration continues to propose massive amounts of government spending, enormous growth of government through a lot of these new programs. Now, what economist Stephen Moore points out is there's a problem here. Other than the obvious, the problem is what happens on the other end. So what's happening is people are being incentivized to support these massive spending because they see it as advantageous to them. So they're being incentivized by hanging the carrot out there of free college tuition, free daycare, free childcare, all these freebies. We're going to get great new roads and bridges. It's a part of the infrastructure plan. There's human infrastructure that they've adapted this term to. So all these things that people see as incentives to be supportive because they see it as money coming in. But economist Stephen Moore points out the biggest losers of this spending is senior citizens. Seniors lose significantly and dramatically. And what he's talking about is the money that's set aside and expected to pay for Medicare and Social Security, 2 critical components for senior citizens. Now, what's happening? Well, there's been projections for quite some time about when the well's going to run dry. And currently, the projections are actually getting closer and closer. So I have the numbers here, and it looks like the expected benefits are going to run out for Medicare by 2026. They're expected to start to lose $500 billion within 10 years. Now, the Social Security fund starts to run out of money in 2034. Now, that still sounds like a long ways off, but first of all, it really isn't. And second of all, these spending plans will impact that. The projections will change as more and more money is taken out and put into these other programs. So as the Democrats continue to expand the benefits, they're going to take away benefits, but that's not what you're hearing about. You're hearing about the positives in terms of what is going to be given, and I say given in quotes, because it's still you're paying for it yourself out of your tax dollars. Now, how they propose this and how they explain to people, because we all know that money's got to come from somewhere. So what they're telling us, and they've told us this is an old playbook, it's coming from the rich. It won't bother you, it won't bother me, it won't bother anybody except those very few people who are so rich they won't even notice the missing money. Well, what's the reality there? Well, the Wall Street Journal pointed this out, that even if you took every single penny from every single millionaire and billionaire in this country, even all of that money together, wouldn't pay for all these programs that this administration is proposing. So that's not possibly the answer. It's not possibly true that we're going to be able to have all these extra benefits, continue to have Medicare and Social Security be solvent, and the only people that are going to be impacted are the very small number of wealthy people. It's not going to happen. So beware of those incentives. That's what they're hanging out there to get people on board, both at the congressional level, where there's freebies that you think you're going to be able to take back to your constituents and say, hey, I got this for you, and just Americans in general to understand that there's no free lunch. So let's not get carried away with these incentives. Make sure we understand how they're implementing these things, that not telling us the whole story. Incentives. One more story about incentives. John Stossel has a story about toxic victimhood. And toxic victimhood, he's going into how is it growing, and why are we having more victims, and why is this happening? And I would say it's part of the incentives. So you're incentivizing people to be victims. So they point out there's this entire industry that's grown up over racism, organizations that have sprouted up to combat racism. There's authors that have written books and become fairly well off by doing that, writing the books, doing the consulting, public speaking on things like racism. So he points out that one of the authors now has an organization for anti-racism, and this organization now gets millions of dollars donated from corporations in the name of anti-racism. So as these industries prop up, these people are incentivized to continue to build racism in this country. They're incentivized to continue to tell us that we're a racist country. They're incentivized to tell us that racism is something that has to be addressed and dealt with and managed because they can do it and get paid for doing it. Incentives. And what about victimhood in general? Well, why this growth? Well, there's incentives to become a victim. There's a lot of pluses to becoming a victim, and that's become popular in our culture. That victimhood is celebrated, success is punished, and so we've created this environment where there is an incentive to be a victim. And so it also points this out, this growth of victimhood is something that we've created. And does it need to be that way? Well, incentives change behaviors. You get the kind of behavior you expect, depending on what your incentive is. Whatever incentive you put out there, that's what drives the behavior. So, those are 3 really great stories. I recommend you look at the full details on heartlanddailynews.com. Otherwise, if you want to see more information about what the Heartland Institute is doing, please go to the website heartland.org. That's it for this week for the Heartland View. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. Have a great week.